I'm your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business owners. Hello, humans. I'm your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business. I talk with sales and HR experts, other business owners, and anyone else that can provide you with information to clear your way to success. Today's topic, communication. My guest today is Jeremy Widenhofer, owner of Chitwood Communications. Jeremy graduated from Indiana University Bloomington with a Bachelors in Public and Environmental Affairs. He then attended the University of Pittsburgh to receive his Master's in Public and International Affairs. Jeremy spent the next few years in the corporate world as an account manager before transitioning over to the government. He spent the next 12 years within the government and Department of State, where he was responsible for creating the Presidential Daily Brief, building national security solutions, and collaborating with the FBI and the military on high-stakes situations. In 2020, Jeremy started Chitwood Communications. Chitwood Communications gives you the resources, knowledge, and confidence to elevate your interpersonal and sales skills that will help you to grow your business. Jeremy, thanks for being a guest on Clearing the Way. Anything else to add to that? I kept it kind of broad and...
No, I thought you captured it well. It's a pretty diverse background. The common denominator across all of it is communicating. So.
Yeah. So that's going to be the topic for the day. We're going to talk about how to improve communication, but let's start with what we're so communication. Everyone, first thing that you think is the way that we speak to each other. But what else are we talking about when we're saying we're trying to improve communication or ways to improve your communication? What are we referring to?
I think it comes down to being memorable and making sure your information sticks. I also think it has to do with how well we listen. So one of the things I like to focus on is also listening as the correct mechanism to communicate better. Communications also covers nonverbals. So the better we are in sync with the other person or the panel or the audience, right? I think that, communications is yes, it's the verbal, but it's also the nonverbal and our ability to be on receive mode so that our output is better.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Okay, so there's I actually recorded you while you were at the speaker series over at Ignite a little while ago. So my thought here was while you were giving that presentation, there were a few different topics that I wanted to ask you questions about, so
Sure.
now I have the ability to do so. So let's start with how this actually relates to small business owners. That's who the show is devoted to. So where, it seems like something that's very easy to overlook. If I have time to improve myself as a small business owner, communication's probably not going to be the top of my list. But why should it be up there? Like, what are those things that it actually impacts that I'm not thinking about as a business owner?
I think it matters because in all the functions of a small business owner, starting with the plan, how you're going to execute it, how you're going to present it, pitch it, you're going to be in front of funding resources. You're going to be in front of clients probably as soon as you can be. And, you are communicating and selling and listening, I think, from the start. And that includes how well you write up a business plan and then how well you verbally pitch it. So there's this like I said earlier, common denominator for small business owners that in every stage that they're in, early, mid growth, and then once you're really fully up and running and growing, you'll be communicating with clients, with other businesses, with banks, with someone who owns a building where you're trying to get in on.
Employees
especially with employees. So how well you communicate, read people, listen, that is going on from conception, I guess, is the way to put it.
Okay. All right, so one of the first things that stuck out to me was this. I feel like this is probably the most common maybe the easiest to notice, but potentially not that easy to to improve is this idea of like the jargon, crutches, all these fillers. I know I've got a ton of them. I've had friends point them out from this show. But so why do those things happen? Well, I guess let's start with what do we mean by that, and then how do we improve that? Why are we doing that? And yeah, I'll just kind of leave it there.
So I don't think everyone's very comfortable with silence. That's one reason why we fill the gap with, well, I just said right?
Yeah.
Oh, there I go again. We have this tendency to not let it go silent. When we can't express ourselves with clarity of thought, we go to phrases, jargon, cliches. I think the problem with doing that is not that you do it once or twice. Once you get into a groove, you're probably less likely to do it. But and I put this up on the screen when I'm in front of groups, when we are repeat offenders, it eventually builds up to almost like a wall. It is a wall between your audience or whoever you're talking to and your clarity, your point, you being concise. And if you become that person who's constantly doing that, if you're the person who is constantly beginning sentences with the word honestly, if you're doing things like that, one thing that stands out on podcasts is people say, "Oh, that's a really good question." Mm-hmm. And that is true. I think a lot of people genuinely feel that way. And I do too when I get asked questions. But if I say that every single time to every single question that you're going to ask me today, well, the one time that I don't do it, it's almost like, what's wrong with that question?
Yeah.
So why do people do it? We need to fill space. I think that people get nervous. People are uncomfortable. And so they have, just call it diarrhea of the mouth, mm-hmm. and they want to fill and they want to fill and they want to tell. And especially for small business owners, we have a lot to tell people. We have really important things that we want to say. It is especially important to say it with clarity and to be precise and to reinforce those points so that stands out, not the cliche, the jargon.
Yeah, and I think some of that just preparing better probably helps that a lot.
Yes.
Because like you mentioned, those pauses or those points where you're filling this uncomfortable air, mm-hmm. you're gathering your thoughts most of the time or trying to figure out what's next. But the preparation can kind of help that. You're not going to be able to get rid of all of it, but like you said, it's when it becomes a distraction.
Yes.
That's where it's a problem because, I don't know, like you got to gather your thoughts sometimes, and you're going to probably have those. Sure, you can get rid of a lot of it, but yeah, like you're gonna have it. You're gonna have it. So
yes.
how do you just mitigate that? And I think the preparation does help that a lot.
I agree. Can I make a point about that?
Yeah.
The most important lesson or the greatest learning experience I had was recording myself and then watching it and listening to myself. I don't know if you do that with your podcast, but the greatest growth that I had as a speaker and as a communicator was in a class, recording some briefings I was doing, and then going back and analyzing it. And it is both painful and the best learning experience you can do. That preparation, along with watching yourself and learning from it, and it can be as simple as using your cell phone and recording yourself before you give that pitch or that idea as a small business owner. Boy, you can really cut out a lot of distractions that you're going to do with your hands, with your eyes, with verbal crutches that we were just talking about. Preparation, I'm glad you used that word, preparation and practice. That is how we start to chisel off, and I always put up a picture of a scalpel. We want to cut these out little as we go, little by little. Very few people are the perfect speaker and pitch person for a small business, but we can get better on this. I put up a picture of the band Journey, and I'm like, this idea of getting better at communicating as a small business owner is a journey. I don't think it's a destination, but practice. Recording and really acknowledging and thinking about these things will ultimately make you a better small business owner.
Yeah, with the I listen to not every one of these. I mean, I have to listen to cut, but actually listening to them through once they're posted, every once in a while I will, but the first of this style that I did, I listened to, it was with Stephanie Masters. I listened through it and I was like, okay, because I took the same approach that I took to the other ones, which are less structured, and I caught it. I was like, oh, okay, there needs to be more preparation for this, like to cut out a lot of these fillers, a lot of this dead air where I'm trying to figure out what's next, which is good, within the course of the conversation, but that it does. I mean, that's a good example of just listening back through to what I was doing, and being able to notice. And most people are probably their worst critics, so maybe not most, but listen through and you see where you struggle, and where to improve.
Yeah, that's really important. I was thinking of an analogy since you used to play football. I often hear football coaches say the greatest leap in performance is between games 1 and 2 during a football season, because there's preparation, there's practice, there's 2-a-days, and then finally you get to a game. And usually, not every time, but there's some things to work out after that first game that is a huge leap between game 1 and game 2 compared to 4 and 5, between 6 and 7, because things just pop out. Things really stand out on film that you can't escape, all right? The eye in the sky doesn't lie. So, therefore, for football, it's true for small business owners. If you can get video or audio of yourself early, that will be a huge, I think, improvement for later on, and as during the trajectory of the business.
So in that same space, what about recording the actual conversations? I don't know. I mean, obviously, you got to hey, I'm going to record this. Is that something that you have done or could recommend? I haven't done that, and I haven't really thought about that, but until this conversation. But is that something, because it kind of you can practice it and listen to that, but it's not going to be the same as that first presentation.
True.
I don't know how awkward that would be to ask, hey, I'm here to pitch you on this. I'm here to sell you my services, but also, do you mind if we record this just for both? I guess if you make that introduction correctly, that could work. But I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, you use the word awkward. I think it is awkward, but let's just talk about, in the right environment, if you are inviting people into your own place of business, and you let them know up front that, if this is my first or second time doing this, or any type of client engagement, if it's on your home turf compared to walking into somebody else's home,
slapping down a recorder and saying, hey, I'm going to record this conversation.
More awkward.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'd pay to watch that, though.
Yeah.
But if it's at your own place of business and you tell people up front, this is a very authentic, genuine statement. I'd like to record this because I want to get better at it. You might get some no's, or maybe you got to calibrate it so that, hey, I'm not going to record your faces and some of your comments, but I'd like to get better with my own communications.
Yeah,
that's something to consider. You know what? Think of how difficult it is starting up a business. Can we afford ourselves some awkwardness to get better? I'm open to that idea.
Yeah, and I think, like you just said, if you approach it from a hey, I'm not very good at this, or maybe not that. That's probably not a good way to approach it. But hey, I'm trying to improve. Would you mind if I did this? That might work. That'll probably be a little bit better than trying to come up with some other reason that isn't real.
Authenticity and being genuine in the ask goes very far.
Yeah.
It's similar to the crutch language challenge. How do we get over that? Well, one of the things is, instead of just filling that space with nonsense, like in the movie Tommy Boy, a few times before he turns the corner and gets better at sales, he's just talking away, and then a couple people say, get the heck out of my office. I've always found it, I thought, to be very valuable to say, that's a great question, as long as you're not saying that every time.
Yeah.
But I'd like to give that some real thought. Can I come back to that question? And especially in the dialogue, if it is potential sale, interaction with clients, that's also an opportunity to make sure you can come back and have a second meeting with them too. That's kind of a sales tool to say, I want to give that some thought. I'd like to put some thought in that overnight, or can we talk about that next week? Because you want to put your best foot forward. You want to have the best possible information. And so I think that you can afford yourself a little bit. You can ask for grace, I think, is the way to put it.
Okay. Any, other than the recording and kind of analyzing things that way, are there any other tricks to... I think the more important thing is, how do you know if you're doing it too much? The fillers and some of those things. Like, what are the... It's easy when you're listening. It's easy when you're listening to some of those things to... I always... The thing that happens when I notice that, as soon as I notice it, then that's the only thing that I'm noticing now, which is where it's a distraction. And then you start, like, counting, oh, this is the 38th time he said or whatever it is. But other than recording it, are there any indicators from whoever you're speaking to that that's happening?
You'll see sometimes if there's a go-to move that you use, you're going to see it in their eyes or in their nose. People are going to start wrinkling their face, because if you say, when you really, this drives me nuts when I hear this repeatedly. Well, when you really think about it, if people are saying that, what they're really saying is, think about it my way. So or you're wrong, Jeremy. You got to think about it this way. So when I hear, if I'm in a conversation, business conversation, or just personal conversation, well, when you really think about it, well, I am thinking about it, okay? Usually there are some kind of, this pivots a little bit into nonverbal, but you can usually see it in their face. Our bodies ooze the truth. And when we get annoyed or we just repeatedly hear that phrase, when you really think about it, eventually I just start disengaging. Did you see what I just did? I pulled away a little bit. So yes, you can practice it. Yes, you can record yourself. But to be very present in the moment, you're going to see little signposts and indicators from the other person. Hey, they're right with me on this. Okay, we are really in sync. But if I keep using that phrase, if I am constantly the quotation person, if you're doing some Tommy Boy nonsense, you're going to see it in the person. It's going to come out of them non-verbally that they're like, why does this guy keep saying that? Okay. So I would say look for it.
Okay. That's good. Okay. Anything else with the jargon, the fillers, some of those things that we should be aware of, or how to improve those? Anything else? I feel like we've gotten kind of... we've covered a lot there.
Listen for it in others. There's someone in my neighborhood who, what's his favorite word? Literally. I love this guy, and he literally uses literally in a lot of his sentences. Often, like, there's a character in Parks and Rec, Rob Lowe, begins all of his sentences with literally, or he works it in. So listen for it, and you're going to find when you're better in tune and you're better listening to someone, you're going to see and hear things that are like, boy, that's their crutch. That's the jargon they always use. That's their go-to line. Boy, they use it every other sentence. And now you understand that feeling of there's blockage. You're on the receiving end of it. And you're going to be better at yourself, because you're going to realize I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I think something to like keep in mind, especially with something like this, because these are they're not quick fix. Like, you can't just notice it and now I don't use jargon anymore. Like, at least I'm assuming you can't just do that. Maybe, but it's going to take some time. As long as you are starting to notice. And starting to improve it, that's a long-term fix that you're trying to do. Like, that is not I noticed it, I just listened to this video, I am never going to use again. Like, that ain't going to happen.
How many times have I said it so far? Yeah. And the point you just made, using your hands, that was a journey gesture. Okay, and that's why I put up the picture of the band to reinforce it. You need to work on this, okay? You can't run a marathon tomorrow. Can you run a marathon in 6 months? I'm asking you. You think you could?
6 months. I don't know. I mean, if I know that's coming up in 6 months, I could probably finish it.
Yeah.
I don't think I would do well.
Okay.
And I would be in a lot of pain after. I mean,
right.
There'd be a lot of walking. I think I could get through it, though. If I had to get through it, I think I could.
You'd have a chance in 6 months with preparation on a journey.
Yeah.
Then, hey, tomorrow you want to join me in a marathon? And
I'm out. No thanks. Okay. So the next thing that I thought was going to be kind of interesting to cover. You covered the power of 3, and I guess I'll start with just kind of explain that to me and to everybody else, and then let's kind of dive into that a little bit.
The power of 3, I think, is the easiest way for a small business owner to tell their idea and their story to make it digestible and memorable. So I started getting into this topic because I've listened to a lot of speakers who have a 10-point plan or an 8-point plan. I've heard speakers who teach classes on how to be effective communicators. And I'm thinking of somebody who spent a lot of time in the White House, and I listened to a speech that this person gave, and they had an 8-point plan that they wanted to share with a bunch of folks in government. And I thought to myself, I think we're all going to remember the first, second, and third, maybe the fourth one, but why an 8-point plan? So I started Googling it and effective presentations and effective speakers, and I kept seeing this idea, and then it finally got captured in a blog that I wrote, The Power of 3. So as children, we are read books when we are toddlers and babies that have 3 in it. Okay, can you think of any children's books with 3 in it? I put you on the spot. I'll help you here.
Yeah, help me out here.
3 Blind Mice. So
3 Little Pigs. I remember.
3 Little Pigs, right?
Through the presentation.
Okay. So there's 3. 3 is digestible. 3 creates a pattern. 3 is a 1, 2, and a 3. It's easier to grasp, retain, and remember in 3 segments. Now, I'd always use that in sales, but this was really reinforced in government. So when we would tell a story, something happened that changed the narrative on a national security issue. And the way we would write about it was in 3 steps. What just happened? That's the news, okay? So that's kind of kept real short. And then the next section was, okay, so what? What does this mean right now? Okay, something happened, something in the immediacy is going to change, or it affects, and there's a change in the trajectory of a group or a country or a person. And then the third one was now what? And we use the power of 3 when we would write for the president and for other government leaders who, by the way, are very busy, who don't have a lot of time for everybody in their day. And if they're going to see me, they're going to see about 20 of me that day. Mm-hmm. That is directly applicable for a small business owner. You have a short amount of time usually. You want to be as effective as possible. You want to be as memorable as possible. Tell your story in a segment of 3. And it might be, here's just one idea that I propose to usually a group, and then we talk about it. You've identified using qualifying questions, either some pain or something that needs to be fixed with somebody. You have a solution for it. And then now that there's this new outcome, there's this new way of working, you're saving time, you're saving money. Pain, solution, a new way of doing things, and that is how a small business owner can pitch their ideas. There's a lot of ideas in how to frame it, but I just think that 3 is very important for people to consider.
Okay, and I think, I don't know, I feel like we always try to complicate things, and we've talked about this in other shows dealing with other things, but I think it kind of goes back to that same point, or it is also present in this, where it's kind of trim these. It's the same with jargon. It's the same with a lot of it actually. Trimming things down to, here's a really good structure for how to lay out this sale, or here's a good way to communicate this point, and there's not a lot of the fat. If you're telling a story, like as an author or something, some fat's good, but it still adds to the story in the long run. I don't know if this is making a lot of sense, but I think this power of three concept is the same. It's just trimming out a lot of these things that aren't necessary so that you can be memorable and they know what you're trying, what the point is to get across.
I think as small business owners, we're tempted to say a lot. Like, we have a great idea, we've got great services, we've been working on a business plan and potentially getting funded or finding space, and we finally have a product and a service we're going to deliver. It's a lot of information that we want to get out there, right? Mm-hmm. It needs to be concise, it needs to be focused, and I think that trying to frame that information, your story, your pitch, in segments of three, it just allows people to retain it better. Now, consider the backdrop that you're talking to somebody about your services. What's going on in 2022 compared to like 10 years ago, especially to 20 years ago? People are getting information faster and they're moving on from it faster too. So they're scrolling through it using their cell phone. They're doing this. Mm-hmm. They're swiping to delete. Our attention spans are decreasing, and that's very findable if you Google it and you look at some of these academic research projects and reports. Our attention span has probably dropped in the past 20 years from about 8 to 10 minutes to 3 to 5 minutes with someone who's speaking to us. And there's a pivot point after 3 to 5 minutes. Hey, I'm either going to stay with Jeremy or I'm going to mentally drift. That's another reason. That is another reason when you are telling your story, tell it in segments of three, because it's probably going to be more concise and refined than an 8-point, 10-point plan.
So I don't know if we actually know the answer to this, but is it that our attention span is becoming shorter, or our willingness to sit through things that we're not interested in is becoming less? Because you look at... Sure, we're going to say it's 3 minutes now, but I'll listen to you talk for 20 minutes or an hour, or I'll listen to a podcast that's 4 hours long if it's something I'm interested in.
Yes.
And there are some of those examples. Now, is that the most common? No, but I don't know. It feels like there's so much information. We have access to so much that it's just that I have less patience for things I'm not interested in. So how do we use that to make sure that we're capturing our audience quicker? Is that...
Yeah. I think of it in terms of, okay, how much information? Well, whatever amount of information that you are going to present in 5 minutes or 30 minutes or, an hour-long podcast. Mm-hmm. Try and divvy it up into thirds so that people know there's an end and a beginning, and they made this point, and here's and the last point was made. That helps me frame the information that when I'm on receive mode. Now, the content itself is a little bit of a different discussion in order to hook people and in order to keep their attention. The content itself is a little bit of a different conversation, equally important as to if you are framing it in a 10-point plan versus a 3-point conversation. The content and how you frame your story, your pitch, whatever it is, that matters just as much. But I believe when you are thinking about a discussion in front of people, when you are thinking about going to the bank or going to a funding source, whatever it is, a group of students that I've been in front of, I try to think of 3 pillars. I'm going to tell them A, B, and C. I'm going to reinforce those points. I went through a couple of corporate sales training programs, and in fact, one of the guys said, hey, when you think of your appointment and your pitch, tell them 2 things so that they remember 1. And now that's really chiseling it down. So I think it needs to be framed in the right manner so that you can help or make it more digestible. But the question kind of got into content. Mm-hmm. Okay, how do I frame this and tell this particular story? That matters. That really matters. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the sales side of things and the pitching and all of that. But does this also translate to handling employees or dealing with uncomfortable situations within your organization or within your business, or how do those things? Well, I'll leave it at that. Does it relate to that, and how can we use this power of three concept in those situations?
I often think of meetings with employees, determining up front, is this going to be a discussion meeting, or is this going to be a declarative? One of those two.
Okay.
Either orders are coming down and there is a new way of doing things, or we're changing how we're doing things, and it's less of a discussion. Open-ended discussions means that we've got to have a little bit of a free flow. We have to brainstorm. Maybe we're sitting and talking for 20 minutes. Maybe this goes an hour or two. But I've often sat in meetings where the person leading the meeting didn't really decide and think critically before the meeting. Is this a declarative, or is this a discussion point? Whichever, especially if it's a declarative, talking to employees on how things are done, I also believe that the power of three can be used in that in order to make things, I keep using the word digestible, but I really think that's important, because that means you take it on and you retain it, okay? And I think that business owners can do that with their employees, so that's a model to do that. If there are open-ended discussions, if it's a critical conversation, you can use it there, but give yourself, I think, a little bit of space. Now, you're kind of like more in artwork than you are in science. And in artwork, that can take a lot of different turns if it is a discussion, a brainstorm session.
Okay. And okay, that's all good. Confidence. Well, let's actually, is there anything else with the power of three that we think is important for small businesses to be aware of, or how to use those? At the end, I've got some scenarios that maybe we can kind of combine all of these topics. But for now, is there anything else that you think we missed?
No, I think that was a good discussion. I mean, there's depending on how someone is selling or pitching something, I think any goal of a meeting really can be structured into three, so that it can be retained. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a reason that Hollywood stories have an arc that is mostly a three-part series, and that's how a lot of plays are written too. So I bring that up along with what I mentioned earlier about the children's books. This is how people learn. We are conditioned to do that. And so whether it's the small business owner talking to the employee, making a sales pitch to another business owner, or being at a bank or a credit union, this is how people retain and remember our information. So I think it's very powerful.
Okay. So confidence. Confidence is one of those, it's displayed a lot of different ways. One of the things that always comes up is like eye contact and some of those types of things. I'll like give you a little bit of breathing room to just talk about that in general with communication. And then there's some questions as far as like confidence versus arrogance in communication and some of those types of things. But I'll just kind of kick it over. And how do we, as small business owners, how does that confidence affect everything? Like, how is that affecting our pitches, our interactions with employees, vendors? How does that affect everything? And then how can we either make improvements or tone it down, or how can we better?
Confidence is going to be present in verbal mode, receive mode, and then also in our nonverbals. I'll often begin this section of when I'm talking about confidence. I'll ask people, hey, what do we do with these, our hands? Okay, so the way that we talk confidence has to come out as genuine and authentic. You have decided to create a business or a service because you're passionate about it, you believe in it, and it needs to come out verbally. Okay, so that means that your product, your service is battle tested. It's working for others, and I think that how we talk, sometimes less is more. And there's a lot of confidence that is displayed in speakers that don't say a whole lot. I named my company Chitwood after the movie Hoosiers. There's a character, Jimmy Chitwood, in it. And he doesn't really speak a whole lot, but one of the most powerful moments in the movie is during a timeout in the championship game, and everyone thinks that he's going to get the ball and hit the game-winning shot, but the coach calls for the play to go to somebody else, and he says Jimmy is going to be a decoy. And he reads the body language of his teammates. They don't have confidence in this plan. They pull back from the huddle. They look away from their coach. They don't make eye contact with him because they've lost confidence in his plan. And Jimmy Chitwood just says 3 words, "I'll make it." And so how we talk really matters as far as being confident. Now, confidence is also expressed in how we listen, I think, too, because I think we all have something to learn from everybody. And if you are very confident in your product and your service, you can still learn from people. Walls don't need to be up. I think that's almost a sign of a lack of confidence. I don't want to learn from others. What if I'm wrong? What if I could just slightly tweak what I'm doing because I'm not doing as well? I think confidence comes out in our ability to listen as well. And then finally, confidence in nonverbals. You know it, you see it. Now, there's a little bit of difference between lack of confidence and nervousness, so let's afford a little bit of leeway there. But one of the great books I read, The Exceptional Presenter, our words in our hands, our words in our shoulders, they all have to match. One can't be confident and the other not confident, right? Broad shoulders, very, hands are gentle and they're composed, but the way you're speaking, it's like, yeah, I think what I have works and maybe you can use it and maybe this will go well. Well, okay, now you're half confident. Your body's confident, but your words aren't, and that also happens, vice versa. So confidence in communications is present, and it is there to be, I guess, utilized in how we talk, in how we listen, and also our nonverbals.
So that seems like another thing that to improve that, preparation is going to help that. Is that, well, how can we improve that? Like, is that I just need to record myself still and kind of work through that? Or even, I don't know, it's more difficult to do that I'll just speak from my experience. One of the things that early on came up, you go to these like a networking event or something as a business owner, and it's, you're early on, you have barely any experience in this. Some of that you're just going to gain from doing it more. But how is there a way to expedite that? Like, how can I get more confident in whatever it is that I'm selling, or with my employee? I have my first employee. Like, I'm not incredible. I think I know what I'm doing. I barely know how this thing's still working. Like, how can we? Is there a way to expedite that learning curve?
I like to watch people. I like to pick up on tools and confidence that I see in others.
Okay.
Now, there's Tony Robbins, confident, a little too much energy for my liking.
Same.
But there's something to be said there about his confidence. Mike Tomlin, coach of the Steelers, when he speaks, I mean, he's always confident, whether he's talking about an injury report, whether he's talking about his critique and criticism of his own team, of his own coaching. He is confident about what he's saying. I think there's something to be learned from other people around us. Just look for it. When you go to these business networking events, I think we can prepare ourselves just like you would prepare your content. You can prepare your body and your mind for confidence as well. I think one thing that matters going to these events is what happens in the 15 or 20 minutes before you walk in the door. What you think about and do 20 minutes before it's showtime, let's call it, really matters. I had a sales trainer one time ask me, Jeremy, before you go into these events, you listen to the news in the car? I said, yeah, I do. He said, why do you listen? Or he asked me, what's on the news? And I was like, the news? And he said, bad news. That's what's on the news. Why are you going to filter your mind with negativity walking into a business networking group? So I want to make the point about preparation. Music affects our mood. Music takes me to different places. It takes me to my childhood. It takes me to playing athletics. It takes me to really good times with friends. Okay, and then there's some other songs that remind me of difficult times in life. So how we prepare going to that, I think, our mental confidence, our body language confidence can be shaped in preparation. So I wanted to make that point. Now, walking into that event, yeah, there is a whole lot we can do in preparation to walk in with that confidence and kick things off with, that first conversation with the first person you meet, shoulders wide, listening, speaking with confidence, and that can be practiced. But some of this is just like you got to go out and learn it.
Yeah, you got to get the reps in.
Great way to put it.
Yeah. So those like 15 to 20 minutes beforehand. Are there any tips? And I mean, like we're kind of using this networking event as something, but I mean, if you've got an uncomfortable conversation coming up with an employee or some big sales meeting or whatever it is, I'm assuming that chunk of time is still super important. What are some of the things that we can be doing during that time to better prepare? You mentioned the music, you mentioned some of those things, but what should we be doing in that time to remove any barriers moving forward?
I think of a sponge. Life happens. We get told bad news. We have problems and challenges at home or with work. We have to squeeze the sponge of all negativity before we head into that event. And I like to put a picture up on my slides of a sponge. This is a true story. I had a couple of business meetings in the afternoon, 2 or 3 o'clock, and I got a call back from my dermatologist, and I had a small spot on my shoulder that turned out to be cancerous. Now, it was the kind that could be dealt with and cut out and wouldn't spread. But the fact that, when you hear the phrase, you have cancer, it just changes you. I should have canceled that 2 p.m. and the 3 p.m. I just wasn't mentally ready. I couldn't squeeze the sponge. But if you are going to go forward with those meetings and walking into a presentation, a networking event, I think you need to compartment. Okay, we have things going on in our lives that can be dealt with later. Can we set aside what might be dragging us down mentally so that we can walk in with full confidence? And one way to think about it is, I would like to accomplish, and then there's a fill in the blank. What would I like to accomplish with this meeting, with meeting 10 people, with giving the sales pitch? And you focus on that end goal, and in the 15, 20 minutes beforehand, how do I get there? And if you can set aside the negativity, look, it's not going to go away, but I need to be at my best for the next hour. I'll deal with that, but for now, I'm going to squeeze the sponge. I'm going to think about my goal for this, and I'm going to go and take steps to accomplish the goal. I do that, but I sure like listening to music that puts me in a great mood sometimes as well. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's way easier to focus on, anything. That kind of, again, that carries over to a lot of things where I got all this stuff going on. I need to accomplish this thing. I can focus on that, and it's a lot easier to kind of push all the other things aside if I have at least some type of goal. It doesn't have to be super super specific, especially at like a networking event. It could be like, I want to talk to like 4 people, and then I can get out of here. Okay. I could focus on that. Like something like that. Okay. That's good.
How about this one? If you're walking in and you are confident, you're fully confident, and you get thrown a curveball, it's something that you don't know. I think one of the most important sentences for a small business owner, and I take this very seriously, is to tell, when you get asked a question, I don't know, but I will find out. And then when you go back and you close the loop on that with an email, with a phone call, with a text, you're accountable. You admit that you don't know something. And even if you went down that path of trying to BS your way through something, people are going to see he's not authentic, he's not genuine. Can he be trusted for a product or a service? So even if your confidence gets just chiseled down a little bit, I'll get you an answer. Let me come back to that. I think that we have to have that in our arsenal to ensure confidence.
Well, and I think while that might hurt the confidence a little bit, saying I don't know, at least for me, whenever I try to just BS my way through it, by the end of that, I feel way less confident. It's like I can try to fake this, but I know after this, I feel worse because I've just explained that I don't have any idea what's going on.
Right. And if you can't get past that, I know that feeling you're describing. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
If you can't get past that mental block, why did I just go on that rant? You know what's going on right at that moment? The other person's talking. You're missing something. You're not in receive mode. It's like you're in regret phase and you're beating yourself up. Meanwhile, hey, the conversation's going on. There's another question coming your way, or there's another comment coming your way. Don't sit and dwell. So another reason not to try and BS your way through it. Admit that you'd like to come back to it. Can I give this more thought? It really shows, like, I tell people, when you say you don't know or can I give it more thought, it shows that you care about what this person is asking or saying, and you want to give it your best thought in response to it. I don't have it in this moment, but I will. So I think that's important.
Okay. So this listening has come up several times, and it feels like a topic that's like, I don't know, it just feels like a given, it feels like something like, oh, we're all listening, but like, not really, like, yeah, I'm hearing you, I'm hearing all the things, but I'm not actually listening to it. And you've mentioned active listening. What do you mean by that, and how? Let's start there. What do you mean by that?
Two things: listening to learn, and listening to build trust and empathy. So if I'm going to be on receive mode with you and I'm going to actively listening, I am going to set aside my own thoughts, biases, my quick responses, and I want to hear and learn what you think, what you're going through, what you have to share with me. And that means you come first, okay? You are more important in this conversation so that I can learn what it is that you want to express. Most of the time, we are listening to respond, right? We are just waiting. When's this person going to stop talking? When's it my turn?
Point, yeah.
Okay. It goes on at work. It goes on at home. Unfortunately, when I walk in the door, sometimes I need to be on receive mode because my wife wants to fill me in on the day, on the kids, on her work, and I'm just not always mentally present, okay? And there is a difference between active listening, full receive mode, versus either listening to respond, or kind of the middle, the level 2 of listening is I'm listening, but I want to listen for a specific thing in there, and everything else is I don't care about, but okay, there I heard it. It's selective listening. Active listening is just you are fully open and on receive mode. Okay.
And how in the world do we get good at that? That feels very difficult. Like those listening to respond and listening to like show that you know what you're talking about or whatever this is. That feels like a really difficult what do we want to call it? That seems very difficult to break.
Yeah, similar to thinking how you are going to present information, okay? I used to block out 10 minutes, 15 minutes before a sales presentation in my old career, and it was to review what I wanted to go over. Now I block out more time so I can think about, hey, I'm going to prepare not only the couple of real punchy points I want to get across, but I want a little bit of preparation on, I'm going to be an active listener in this meeting. I'm going to think about if I've met this person before, how they communicate with me, how are the points that they want to express, what do they do with their hands to really emphasize something, what am I going to look for to be a better listener? So you asked how to prepare. Well, make active listening part of your preparation. Going back to the point about a sponge, squeeze out the information that's pressing in your head, things that you need to accomplish. One of the things that I do is I turn this off. This is critically important. It's not on. I don't want this buzzing. I don't want this even on silent mode. I don't want to be tempted to look at it. There's a Harvard business professor in one of her in a TED Talks said, this is the world's largest distraction magnet. I love this device. I also hate this device at the same time. Another thing to do about active listening is, I think about things that my best possible product and service will be a tailored product and service. How do I get to a tailored product and service for you? That means I'm on receive mode. I'm using both of these ears in order to talk through my one mouth. And by the way, I think that ratio was made on purpose, 2 to 1. My best possible product is going to be if I use the information you tell me and go from there. I'll end with this. I also think that using qualifying questions, open-ended questions, gets you to that point. So if you think about the list of journalistic questions that they use, okay, they don't use a lot of dualistic, closed-ended questions, yes or no. That really helps people unpack how they feel, and you'll probably find a pain point, what they want fixed, what they need to save time on. So how to be better at active listening, use those open-ended questions that begin with why, how, where, when. Those questions get people to really open up better than if you hit them with a lot of yes and no's.
Okay. And are there any other, the thing that keeps coming to mind as we're talking about this is from Never Split the Difference, this the concepts of mirroring and labeling and those types of things. Are those things that you should be trying? Do those help in this situation, or are they at least little tricks to get you closer to that point quicker? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can those be used to help expedite your learning of this active listening thing? Because it's a difficult or uncomfortable thing probably more difficult than uncomfortable, but to start trying to do more of, and really you're the only one that knows if you're doing it.
You said mirroring,
labeling, some of those types of things.
Yeah.
Maybe labeling not as much, but
and you're talking about physically mirroring or no?
Well, so one of the concepts is both physically, energy level, and then also with using the same words. So, it drives this point of I'm listening because maybe it's a word or a phrase or something.
I really like that tool because it shows that you are listening down to the singular word in a full sentence. So earlier, I can't remember what word it was, but I said, you used the word, and I forgot what it was at the time, but something jumped out to me in that sentence, and I wanted to grab it and unpack it with you. So mirroring and using people's phrases and words that they used is, I think, a quality sign of active listening and being engaged. What I got better at over time was, I would hear somebody, an office manager say, and we'd really like to change things up because people are wasting time and we're not getting as much work done as we used to. So that's why, we're exploring some new technology concepts. And what I got better at was saying, hang on a second, can we just stay on that point about people are wasting time? Why did you say that? If you can grab what they say and then open it up with them using those open-ended questions, I really think that is a move towards empathy and building trust. I mean, who do we buy from? People we like and we trust.
Yeah.
And who do we like and trust? People that listen to us. So I like those concepts. I think they're important to use during active listening.
Well, and for me, that helps. It's easy to talk about, saying to, it helps to gamify, it almost gamifies it for me, which isn't great, but it helps to at least learn to build the habit to then, okay, now I can actually do this thing. But yeah, that little tricks like that, or the little, just like you meant, pick a goal for the meeting, and that's what, attack that goal. And I can block everything out. And maybe that doesn't work for everybody, but for me, creating a little game out of it, that's helped me a lot in becoming better with people. Treating, is it the best way? Probably not, but it helps me, and now I don't have to gamify it anymore,
Yeah. I like that concept. I think that works. So I use that as well. But I also leave a little room of, hey, I might have to use the mental agility to go left or right on something. I know I'm trying to accomplish this one thing, but depending on what they say, what they emphasize, or where you can just tell, that's another pain point that needs to be pulled a little bit here. Let's go explore that as well. I think that's a good game plan going in for listening. There's some small tactical things that we can do to become better listeners. I mentioned the cell phone earlier. I didn't wear a watch today. I didn't want to be tempted to look at my watch while the camera's on me. That's a small thing that if you think you're tempted to do that, especially in crucial conversations or critical conversations with an employee, do you want to be caught looking at the clock several times or doing one of these? That really matters. So I think the watch and the cell phone, where you sit in a room matters. If your back is to the hallway where people are walking by, that helps you become a better listener, so that when someone comes by with flowers, if someone comes by with pizza boxes, if you see another employee leaving early, right, you're just going to say with your body,
wow. Okay.
Boy, I'd like to go talk to that person. I'd rather not be here. So how and where you sit really matters. I also found that if we're at a table and we're having a conversation, not with microphones, but a CFO told me this one time, he comes around to the side and puts his chair next to the person. He removes the table barrier so that he is listening physically directly to the person's body.
That feels so uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, or he would just be right around the corner as opposed to there, because it is a gesture. Hey, I'm going to come in a little bit closer proximity. I'm not going to have my computer screen in front of me. Also, a very tempting device like the watch, like the cell phone. Computer screens need to be, lock the screen, close the laptop. Active listening really is also about your environment too. Okay.
I had not even considered that. That's interesting. But obviously that makes sense. If I'm distracted, how am I if there are things moving by me, how am I going to be actually focused on everything that you're doing? I can be pretty focused, but if I've got flowers or an employee leaving early, you mentioned, okay, well, that's clearly going to catch my attention.
Here, can I add one more?
Yeah.
A beam of light from our chest, pointing our beam of light towards the person we're talking to. There's a great scene, well, it's an ongoing scene in the movie The Social Network about Mark Zuckerberg when he's being sued by some his former classmates and people he was working with. And during the scenes with his attorney and the other side, he's constantly turned away from them. He is not showing his beam of light towards them because he is not interested in what they're saying. In fact, he's repulsed by it. So he turns away from them. And active listening means like, hey, you get all of me. And I think that means like opening up your shoulders and pointing that beam of light at someone. And then if you're in front of more than one person, like on a panel, and you're on a swivel chair, I think it matters to turn and I'm with this person now. Oh, this person has a question. And then this person over here has a question. The way I frame it is share your whole self with the other person, because if I got someone to the left of me, and hopefully this is on the camera, if I'm fielding questions over here, and then I just do this over here to that person, it's, hey, you're not worth it. Yes, I'll answer your question, but what matters is right here in front of me. Now, if you're talking to the president of an organization, the person who signs on the line, they get a little bit more of your beam of light. But if there are equals around the room, I need to address that person over here as equally as I did right in front of me or to this side. So I like to talk about the beam of light that you need to share with everybody that you're talking to.
Okay. So that kind of brings me to this idea of, body language definitely, but also kind of tone and how some of those things can be used. But body language is obviously important, and it's maybe more common to think about now, but I still think it's it's definitely second. Like verbals and that is all still first when I'm thinking about communication. But is that actually the most important piece? Like, how much are we really learning and maybe subconsciously taking in from body language, and how important actually is that?
I think body language is more important than the verbal words we're using. I don't know the exact percentages. I've looked at a lot of different studies, but I think all of them, the most important factor in how we listen and communicate and read somebody is in the nonverbals compared to what's being said. So I do think it is actually more important than the words coming out of my mouth. It's the whole body experience.
Yeah.
These nonverbals matter from our forehead down to our feet. And how well we're engaged, how well we're listening, really matters what we're doing with our entire body. And it is also critical to, as you are reading the person that you are pitching, that you are selling to as a small business owner, you can look for signs of interest and disinterest. They're going to tell you non-verbally, unless they are truly so stoic that they don't show truths that, and there's very few people like that. And even if you do come across someone that you can't read, boy, that's when you use those open-ended qualifying questions and those journalist questions. But look, I think I mentioned earlier, our body oozes the truth. So as we are engaged with someone, I am watching their hands. I'm watching when they come in towards me at the table. I'm watching when they disengage. One of the most important features I learned when I was briefing people and senior level government officials was when they would, grab their pen and start taking notes. Okay, what I just said really matters compared to the previous 5 minutes where they weren't taking notes. When people just slightly tilt their head, okay, or if they do something with their eyes and they kind of scrunch their eyes a little bit, it usually indicates a sign of, well, that's fascinating or that's interesting. So reading the person and then our own nonverbals probably matter more than the words coming out of our mouth.
Okay. So here's what's strange, well, not strange about that. If I get really good at reading that, or if I'm, so what's probably better is when I'm starting to try to get better at these things, that feels like it could be a little overwhelming. Like I'm trying to watch everything you're doing, and now I'm seeing, okay, like it feels like that could be difficult to actually get points across that. Like it feels like how can I learn to view these things better without becoming completely lost in it? Like, are there any tricks to that? Because if I'm like, okay, well, he's doing this now, like, what am I? Now I'm out of the listening. I'm only focused on these things. How can I get better at these?
Well, I think first and foremost, we talked about the sponge earlier. You know, in order to almost empty yourself of some of the other thoughts, ideas, concerns that we have, everything that's going on, look, in order for us to be on receive mode, to hear and listen to them, and then pick up what they're doing with their hands, their eyes.
It's a lot going on.
It is a lot. So, okay, let's re-emphasize that point of going into a meeting and being on receive mode. Now, one of the things that I like to do is take notes. And if you can have that mental agility, and sometimes this takes time, but if you can take notes and maybe even some little codes, when there's a point of emphasis that somebody makes that's very important to them, I use a star, I use an exclamation point, I circle something I need to come back to. You know, use that notebook to help manage all this information that's coming at you, because you're hearing it, you're seeing it. And the other thing is, to stop and ask questions along the way. I often cite movies and TV shows, but we have so much to learn from them. In the movie The Big Short, Steve Carell's character is constantly telling people, wait, hold on a second. Why did you just say something? Mm-hmm. Or wait, why is that? We've got all this data coming at us. If you can take almost like a little bit of a timeout or go back to something you missed, ask the question. So you can be mentally prepared. You can take notes. You can ask questions to help almost do like a little bit of a reset in your mind, and then you can come back to something. So don't be afraid to utilize some of these tools. And here's the other thing too. If you find it difficult to watch the arms, the eyes, and listen, and you're overburdened with information, just dial it back on what you want to look for, and otherwise you're not going to get anything.
Yeah. Well, and that becomes the only thing you're thinking about, and then But I think another thing that could be helpful is don't try to do these things. Don't try to get better at these things in just important conversations. Like, again, this idea, like, to try to gamify, like, okay, I'm going out with my friends tonight. Okay, tonight I'm just focusing on eyes. Like, let's try to learn about this. I don't know if this is a good idea, like that I'm pitching right now, but trying to get better at paying attention to those things when it's not super important. So then when those other times come, then it's more natural. Okay, cool. Like, I'm decent at eyes now. Like, yeah. All right, great. Now let's worry about hands today. And that might be a way to simplify some of these things so that you're not going into your next pitch meeting trying to focus on everything. Like, all right, I just listened to the podcast. Everything's important. Oh, wow, I just blew this meeting because I'm not paying attention I'm trying to pay attention to everything, and now I'm not focused on anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. We've got all these opportunities to read body language and practice. At home I have a teenager. If the teenager is by herself, maybe she's not real talkative to her dad. When the teenager is with other teenagers, okay, they are going to be talking and I'm going to learn things that I didn't know before. Mm-hmm. So my ears pick up. But at home, if it's just like her and me and she doesn't have any friends around, I do kind of watch her body language and her hands and her eyes a little bit. She's really good at putting her arm on her side and kind of doing that what, right? Okay, so non-verbally, I'm watching more often when she's alone, but boy, when a group of teenagers get together, they're very talkative. if I can bring up football for a second, it's fascinating to watch football because you can tell oftentimes if there's a play in review and the ref hasn't made the announcement, but he tells the coach. You can tell the nonverbal from the coach. He likes what's coming or he doesn't. Mm-hmm. Or let's say a defensive back breaks up a play and he comes up with just the utmost confidence and does the incomplete sign and high fives a teammate. He doesn't think a flag is coming, or maybe he's faking it, right? If that defensive back comes up and he starts doing they can throw a flag on that? Okay. He doesn't have as much self-confidence, and his nonverbals are telling me he thinks he probably committed a foul. So we've just got all these opportunities to get better at, I think, to practice. And then when it's go time in sales, you can get better at this over time.
Yeah, and I guess this might be a little bit of a weirder way to do it, but just when you're out, actually do a little people watching. You can get don't be a creep, but you can be you can get some people watching in and just start if you're bad at these, if you're really starting from a point of I have no idea how to read people.
Right.
All right, let's go just walk around Walmart and see how are people interacting? Mm-hmm. What's going on in their face? What are they doing with their hands? What's happening in these conversations?
Yeah, at restaurants.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
restaurants is probably better than a grocery store, but
yeah, because now you are in, especially if you're there with one or more people, you have to engage. Now, hopefully their cell phones are down and you can watch is that a couple on their first date?
This is my favorite game to play.
Yeah, right?
Sarah and I play it all the time.
How about this one? That's a set of parents that's out without the kids for the first time in a long time, and they're just glad that they're not, keeping someone from throwing French fries at each other. So, at a restaurant, that's a great opportunity to watch hands, to watch the body language. Are they leaning in? Are they doing a little bit of I'm trying to figure out this other person, right? First date, second date. How about this? One of the two people are really interested in being there, and the other person isn't. I can't get enough of this people watching. Yeah. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And it can be a good tool to try to get better. And that's a good way to. I mean, if you're bad, it could be a great starting point for you.
Everyone can learn to pick up on it and improve your own nonverbals. Yeah. Everyone can. It takes a little bit of you have to choose to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can do it in bits and pieces, and it doesn't have to be at work. It can be outside of work, but just start watching the hands, the shoulders. It's all around you. Yeah. It's there for the taking if you want to start picking up on these things.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, this fidgeting and this definitely relates to the body language thing, but fidgeting and doing just not being comfortable in the situations. I'm guessing that's what that is. But what are we telling people if we're super fidgety, or is that just a comfort mechanism? What are we telling people, and is that something that needs to be overcome? This might be similar to the fillers, where it's okay in bits, but if it becomes distracting, now we've got an issue.
Yeah. I immediately thought of clicky pens and the importance of not having a writing utensil that you can either twist or click to make a noise. It's worth saying that we need to baseline people. How do they normally sit, and what is their baseline posture and physical activity? Because there are fidgety people in the world. There are people who sit like a statue and they don't move. Okay, so if we're going to baseline someone, we're going to learn how they often sit. My wife often has her arms crossed. She is not in confrontational mode with me. She just, that's how she's comfortable. So let's set the stage here that people have a baseline, and then from there,
that makes a ton of sense.
From there, they have certain activities where, I just saw an anomaly. They liked what I said, or they didn't like what I said. Look, if you are a fidgety person and you do want to come across more as confident, calm, this also starts with practice and having something in our hands like one of those stress balls. You can also watch yourself. You can watch other people, and you can pick up on, I want to start doing that more, or I want to shed that bad habit.
Uh-huh.
So look, to fidget, I think is okay, especially if it's within that mode of, okay, they just don't sit still often. And then from there, my mind goes like, are they highly caffeinated? Are they one of those people who are naturally caffeinated with energy all day long? And I'm so fascinated by those people. But look, everyone has a baseline.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, let's look for that and understand it, because when they'll show you changes from the baseline.
Okay. That makes, I just imagine like, oh, well, I'm a fidgeter. That's saying that's something, But if that is the base, that's such a good observation.
A really smart professional who worked in the intelligence business and for corporate America really made that point to me. I consider him a mentor, and he's one of the best people persons I've ever met. And in the totality of communication, verbal, nonverbal listening, and it's one of the things that he really seized on and was very good at in order to help me understand, okay, someone's moving a little bit more in their seat compared to the person next to them. Okay, don't take that as face value that they're nervous or they want to get out of there. Let's take a moment to understand how they naturally sit or how they naturally present themselves. Now, let's take for a moment for small business owners, though, if they want to cut out, what they're doing, something with their hands or their shoulders, there's a lot of good material out there on confident presenting and confident body language to include, what to do with our hands. Where do we put them? What should they be doing? And, there's a few pictures that I use that really show when you're standing up, when you're presenting in front of one or more people, what are the best postures? And some postures give off confidence and being calm, and others less so.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resources out there that people can learn from.
Well, so when you're reading other, like whoever you're speaking to, though, if this is the first time I've met, so I'm trying to pitch this person for the first time. How can I distinguish what is their baseline and what is just their, like, I've never met you before. I've got 20 minutes with you. That seems, you might just be, I don't know, you might just be anxious the whole time, or like how, I don't know, maybe this isn't as important for small business owners because we're not trying to, maybe you're not trying to become the best person or the best reader, but I don't know, does that, like, how can you get through how can you find the baseline if you're only interacting with someone during stressful times?
If you meet someone for the first time, that baseline of how they are is to be determined.
Yeah.
So you may not know. I would suggest for that person to look for quick changes, okay? That opportunity where someone gives you a nonverbal, whoa, you do that? Okay? And you'll see it in their face, their shoulders. Okay. Or if you are walking through, again, that 3-part series that you want to present, and you'll see where they're interested in one point that you're making, less so on another. Okay, I'm picking up on that. I'm not going to address that as much, but maybe I come back to that other point when they came in and leaned in towards me. They did they looked to their colleague or their business partner and did one of those things that people do with their eyes, with their mouth. Okay, maybe you don't get their baseline, but people are going to show you signs of interest and disinterest. You got to look for it.
Okay, so these are all different tools and different things to pick up, not all at once. And they might be all at once, but it doesn't have to be, it's not an all or nothing thing. You can, like you just said, like it might be something with your eyes. It might be something different, but there's not like it doesn't have to be all or not. You're not reading everything and there's like, okay, well, this is the baseline. Like, this is how this person is. Yeah. You're picking up everything individually, if that kind of makes sense. I don't know if I explained that well, but
this isn't a lot of these concepts that we've been talking about. I don't think it's a light switch.
Yeah.
You asked about, a lot of your questions are about practicing. How do you get better at, okay, if someone's listening to this entire discussion, what they should do is gravitate towards a concept and idea that we had here and choose to go look for it and try and get better at it. And look, there's a lot of things that we've been discussing. Can you light switch all of them all at once? No, but I can go out and start recognizing signs of interest and disinterest. I can take the time to video record myself talking for 10 minutes, and I will find things that I like that I do and things that I want to work on. So, going back to the point about a journey, take steps and improve how you are presenting material, how well you are listening, how well you are presenting your nonverbals and how much confidence you are expressing with your eyes, your face, your hands, and then also how well you are picking up on that. We have an endless amount of opportunity to learn around us.
Yeah.
So, okay, outside of normal business hours, we are still going to have these learning opportunities. We discussed them a little earlier.
Yeah. Okay, so anything, there were a couple of these scenarios, and based on, we'll hop into these. You've got to be out of here at 12, right?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a couple scenarios that and we've kind of been touching on them the whole time, but I want to be a little bit more specific in how we can approach some of these things, just so that we've got something to... something that actually, specifically relates to people that are listening. So, we've got a situation with an employee or a customer that is unhappy. How can we use all of these different topics that we've talked about to approach these conversations, and whether that's preparing for the conversation with 3 bullet points or 3 in 3 segments? Like, how can we go into this situation? Let's use a customer, and maybe it's the same for a a difficult customer or difficult employee situation. Maybe those are the same preparation, but how can we kind of use all of these things that we've talked about, prepare for it, and then execute during this meeting?
I think it begins with quality questions, okay? Yeah, you might have a presentation or some points you want to uncover, but if we're talking about an unhappy customer or it's an employee performance issue, we need to go in with open-ended questions to learn what is going on from their point of view, what their pain points are, and try to pull the thread on what happened and why. So active listening comes into play. Really clearing your mind of other information, squeezing the sponge to get ready for that conversation so that you can be in full receive mode. Your body language matters. Are you going to be on receive mode? Are you going to be like physically open with your body to say, I welcome your information. You don't want to give off little signs of disinterest or I don't believe you. And so I think that matters. One of the things that we can verbalize that I think really matters is phrases that begin with what I'm hearing is. Okay, another one is I'm sensing that, fill in the blank, because what that does is I'm going to prove to you that I've listened to you, but I want to have absolutely clarity on the issue, and that's repeating back, using their words but in another format, so that there is no possible way that the problem can be misinterpreted. We now have identified the issue. So I think that it's everything we've talked about, the nonverbals, the asking of the questions, listening, and making sure that our environment is set up to listen well.
And so that covers these times when we've got some time to prepare for it.
Mm-hmm.
how about when it's something that just happens? How can we get into that? How can we handle those situations in a way that is not detrimental to either the relationship or to the employee? Or like, is there a way to, other than just getting better at those things, like just getting better at handling adversity, I guess, but how can, when those things just pop up, are there any little tricks that we've got to handle those situations with, how can we handle those better?
In that type of scenario, I think it's important to state explicitly, I would like to handle this, fix it, whatever verb is needed in the scenario right now. This is important to me. And if it's the kind of the customer thing, I can see it's very important to you. And it matters that we pay attention to this, or that I pay attention to this right now. If it, same goes for the employee performance issue. And I'm thinking of all the times where, raising kids, I let something linger. And the tough conversation 24 or 48 hours later would have been better handled in the moment. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about ripping off the Band-Aid in a professional, courteous, but firm manner, so that the person understands that either their problem is going to be fixed and addressed, or if it's employee performance, we do things in a better way here. Here's how and why we do that. And I want to make that point about why, because the younger generation is needing that why more and more. More so than the older generations in the workforce. When walking through a little bit more of the how and why we're doing things here is more common. It's not for everybody, but it's more common in some of the younger generations than the older ones.
Okay. Okay. So I feel like we've covered the preparing for a pitch or a prospective client or anything like that pretty well. We also touched on the networking events already. But let's see. Well, actually, here's one that we haven't covered at all. Do these things carry over to marketing? And they might just come across very different. Like because you're probably leaning towards more like video and for and like copy, but should you be carrying over the same concepts to marketing? And maybe that's not something that we want to tackle, but I'm sure there's some things that can relate.
One of the tools in presenting information is just keeping it as simple as possible. Simple is digestible. Simple can be memorable. I often look at companies' mission statement, and I kind of measure how many abstract words and concepts they use versus a very concrete thing that they do make or provide. And this is me, I gravitate towards simple and concrete compared to mission statements that are 2 and 3 sentences long. Lofty and don't really mean anything. And a couple of bullet points. Somebody put it this way. They made the suggestion, they were marketing specialists, and it was I think it was in technology, but it said something like, there was a 2 or 3 sentence mission statement, and they said, well, how about this? We provide computers fast. And that's, simplicity in marketing, and there's marketing specialists who will know more than me about this, but I'm always interested and gravitate towards something that is shorter than longer, and also, do I understand it in very clear terms, what you do? We clean airplanes. We make your airplanes, more. They run faster and better with our service, or something like that. Yeah. I just, when people have to think about it, you start to lose them. Yeah, well, there's a Alex Hermosi.
I forget the title of his book, but I've followed him on Instagram, and he's got this. I actually just this week shared this video with a friend of mine, but he says like most people, like in general, don't read beyond it's like a 6th grade level. That's the average, and people that do read above that, you don't want to spend your brain power processing. Like simplify things, make things as simple as possible. Obviously, that can be maybe to a detriment, but simplify, make things easily understandable, and then you're accessible to more people. Also, maybe that doesn't work and this is more on the marketing side, but I think it does carry over to if you're making a pitch or handling customers, or employees. If you're trying to come across as, I've got all these words and concepts that I'm using, but they don't understand it. That doesn't do anybody any good, because now you've got people that don't actually understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great point. Simplicity in an era where, if we can go back to receiving more information faster, I think it doubles down on the importance that you have a simple message that people understand and can remember it. Okay, probably more so than 20 years ago, than 30 years ago, when people weren't carrying around their cell phone and scrolling through several websites or getting their news from headlines on Instagram. I often wonder, if we were having this conversation 40 years ago, were people processing, information a little bit slower and having more drawn out conversations, right? But today, I just think there's a premium on telling an effective message in a short, concise way where people understand, okay, now I understand what Bradley does. He is the guy that does this.
Yeah. And
when I need this, he's the guy I call.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like we've covered a lot. Anything that we haven't touched on with communication for the business owners that you think should be covered before we wrap up?
I'll suggest a book for people who want to really think about how they are presenting information. There's a book called Made to Stick by the Heath brothers. Made to Stick, a real short title. There are some fascinating concepts in there for marketing, but also when we are in front of people and we have a message about what Chitwood does or about what you do. It really breaks it down into telling compelling stories or credible voices or telling something unexpected where, people get hooked by a story that's unexpected. They have that wow moment. They have a light bulb moment. I refer to that book quite a bit, and I reread it because, we talked a lot about how to format information, how to capture and keep attention, but the content itself, there's a lot of good tools in that book. And I'm always listening to and trying to read about people who tell captivating and very memorable stories. And I grab those tools and I use it in my own work. I think when we have our ears up and we're very attentive to what's going around us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, there's a suite of tools out there right at our fingertips and what we're watching and listening to.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to have that awareness and grab concepts and ideas that help them tell a more effective and memorable story in their small business.
Okay. Yeah, that's I feel like we didn't really get into the content side, and I think that might be a good second episode at some point if you're open to it. But
I didn't tell that on purpose, but yeah, if we can do that again sometime,
I think that'd be a good one.
There's a lot of value in thinking and critically about, okay, how do I express this? And that book is a great starting point for small business owners, I think.
Okay. Anything else before we go?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's what I have. Thank you very much for having me.
For sure. Where can everybody find you? Websites, all that.
Sure. Chitwoodcommunications.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under Chitwood and also Jeremy Widenhofer. And please reach out. I've one of the short, simple messages that I try to reinforce is, for groups, for students, and for businesses that want to improve these areas. You talk, I'll listen, and I'll develop a tailored plan. 1, 2, 3. And so people ask, like, well, how does this work? And I just tell people, I'll listen to what you're working on and what you want to get better at. So you talk, I'll do the listening, and then you'll get a tailored plan.
Awesome. All of those links will be down in the description. Links to all of that will be down there. Thank you for coming on. I was looking forward to this one. Share this with all of your friends that are maybe could use some improvement or yourself. And thanks for listening and watching. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you're consuming this. I'm your host, Bradley Martin, and this is Clearing the Way, a resource for small business owners.